you with my studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is July 31st. That is the 212th day of the year. 153 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. National Avocado Day, National Chili Dog Day, National Mutt Day, World Ranger Day. It's also National Intern Day, National Raspberry Cake Day, Black Tot Day. Now, when I say black tots, it's in the annals of naval history. Few traditions are as universal or universally recognized as a daily rum ration of the British Royal Navy. It's a time-honored practice spanned over 200 years. Came to an end on a day now known as Black Tot Day. That's just not the date in the calendar, it's a symbol of a bygone era, a nod to naval traditions of the past, celebration of the spirit of camaraderie that defined life on the high seas. National Jump for Jelly Beans Day, Lifeguard Appreciation Day, Shredded Wheat Day, the National Digital Adoption Professionals Day, Uncommon Instrument Awareness Day. Take out some time in your day to research the many varied and unique instruments in the world. Consider trying one to expand your horizons. National Fishing Month, Hog and Rock Festival. It's a previously known as Woodstock Festival in Poland. Stands as one of Europe's longest free music festivals. Every year it draws massive crowds eager to experience the vibrant blend of music and art and community spirit. The festival's atmosphere is infectious, and depending on who you deal with, you may be infected as well. National Marine Week, Festival of British Archaeology, Love Parks Week. Get out in the fresh air, enjoy the scenery and reasonable activities. Add in the big butterfly count. Monitoring environmental vitality by tallying up the butterflies. Famous people born on this date: B.J. Novak, Wesley Snipes, Mark Cuban. Well, on that note, let's see what's in the news. The San Jose State University trans scandal has grown as female athlete makes a new claim, and was an attempt to interview the director of their athletic director, ran from the interview. But its ex, San Jose State University star, Brooke Slusher, makes new allegations about the probe into the trans teammates so they blocked to harm her. She's 8 months removed from her final season, which included a conference investigation into an alleged plan to harm her by former teammate Blair Fleming, biologically male transgender athlete, and she's now making new allegations related to the matter. Fox tried to interview San Jose State Athletic Director Jeff Konya to ask about Slusher's claims, and after 5 minutes, Konya said, "I'm done," and walked off. Slusher pleads alleged in a lawsuit signed by 10 of the current or former women's college volleyball players against the Mountain West and representatives of San Jose State, that Fleming and other teammates snuck out of the team hotel the night before an October 3rd game against Colorado State and met with an opposing player. Lawsuit alleged a teammate who snuck out with Fleming later told players and coaches of an alleged plan by Fleming and a conspiracy with the Colorado State player to have Slusher spiked in the face during a match. That's basically considered dirty pool. You know, the liberal media is in disarray as Trump's, the liberal media tried to destroy Trump. Instead, he crushed them. Everything he has touched to this point has come up golden, and they can't seem to accept that. Well, the two parents that were killed walking with their daughters in Devil State Park, man's been charged with capital murder. James Andrew McGowan faces capital murder charges in the Devil's Den State Park double homicide. Special agents with the Arkansas State Police arrested McGann, 28 years old, of Springdale, for his part in a double homicide that happened on Saturday. He's accused of killing Clinton Brink, 43, and Kristen Brink, 41, while they hiked with their daughters. The two daughters, 7 and 9 years old respectively, are now with family. But he's being charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Well, that beatdown in Cincinnati, a Cincinnati official was charged, well, under fire rather, for celebrating the attack. She said they begged for that beatdown. Well, a Louisiana Medicaid millionaire bought a $100,000 Lamborghini while claiming government benefits for years. According to investigators, she flaunted her luxury lifestyle on social media. At the same time, she's fraudulently getting government benefits. She's facing a fraud charge, according to authorities. Candace Taylor, 35, of Slidell, been called the Medicaid millionaire by the Office of Louisiana Attorney General Liz Morrell. She was arrested on Monday. The State Bureau of Investigation began looking into Taylor after getting a complaint from the Louisiana Health Department saying she underreported her income to qualify for Medicaid benefits, and in buying the Lamborghini. Well, Islamist terrorists have killed 49 Christians in an African church massacre. Eyewitnesses came forward and revealed the details. It was a church in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. 9 of those individuals who were killed, decapitated really, were children. Several other children were abducted. The attackers were members of the Islamist Allied Democratic Forces, a sanctioned rebel group with roots in Uganda. Now, according to survivors in the village where the church was located, including a shop owner who managed to be an eyewitness and escaped detection by the attackers, even though his shop was burned down, and the reported position of the bodies of those hacked to death, the church worker pieced together an account of how the attack happened. The witness knew something was wrong even before she reached the village from her home. She said we could see people already leaving, carrying their bags and heading for more secure areas. Well, the world is not a peaceful place, that's for sure. Well, migrant sex crime has surged in Houston, Texas, tied to Biden's open border. That information came from a former judge. Trump has helped it drastically. Well, Nancy Pelosi was being interviewed by Jake Tapper, of all people, Mr. Liberal himself, and he asked her about the allegations of insider trading, and she just went nuts during a CNN interview. President Trump's accused former House Speaker of becoming rich by having inside information on stocks. And which is worth over $150 million according to reports. You don't get that on your salary. Entrepreneur Elena Cardona says the left has attacked feminism and betrayed women. She says the Greater Party no longer aligned with her core values of family and female empowerment. And to be perfectly frank, the Democratic Party's gone off the rails. It's become something indescribable. Well, a Delta flight was diverted to Minneapolis after severe turbulence. Left 25 people on board needing hospitalization. The aircraft, an Airbus A330, landed safely at Minneapolis airport. Medical personnel met the flight to evaluate both the customers and the crew. It was carrying 275 people and 13 crew members from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam. It was forced to divert to the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport after the flight encountered significant turbulence while en route. "25 people were transported to local hospitals for evaluation and care." So that must have been some kind of turbulence. Well, a city councilor in Virginia was attacked by a constituent with gasoline and set on fire in a workplace attack. Suspect allegedly poured a 5-gallon bucket of gasoline on Lee Vogel for setting him on fire. It was Danville City Council member Lee Vogler, 39, working in the Showcase magazine office at about 11 in the morning, when Shotzi Michael Buck Hayes, 29, also of Danville, forced his way into the building carrying a 5-gallon bucket of gasoline, threw it on Vogler and set him on fire. Hayes is being charged with attempted first-degree murder, aggravated malicious wounding. Well, Harrison Ford laments the fact the rich get richer and the poor get poorer in a critique of President Trump's presidency. Since he's a millionaire himself, I think we should consider the source. He said, in politics and in life, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you get and you don't get upset. They teach us that in kindergarten. They also teach you to fight for what you think is right. Well, I think it's a little odd. One of the Hollywood elite is coming out with this attitude. Well, the American Eagle stock is soaring as the Liberals melt down over Sydney Sweeney's Jean ad. Well, a lot of right-wing hosts are saying it's time for Powell to get out of the way of Trumponomics. Sophie Cunningham opens up on ex-team's treatment of Caitlin Clark and the infamous fight that chipped her tooth. Says she chipped her tooth during a scuffle with Connecticut Sun player J.C. Sheldon. Cunningham's been called the enforcer teammate of Caitlin Clark. And Cunningham revealed how her former team, the Phoenix Mercury, will plan to play Clark during the phenomenal rookie season 2024. There's a lot of jealousy, even in women's sports. All right. Employees across America are shaken up by all these deadly office attacks. And there's been a lot of questions about what to do to stay safe. Experts advising employees to know where the emergency exits are, and when something like this happens, run, hide, and fight. Framework is recommended for office safety. For example, in the 345 Park Avenue shooting, since he was on I think the 35th floor or the 63rd floor, I don't remember which, but he was fairly close to the elevators. And let me tell you, I lived on the 35th floor in Trump Tower in New York City, and going down the stairs was an all-day job. According to Patrick Timlin, CEO of Silver Seal Corporation and a veteran of law enforcement and private security, when something like that happens, it's not just for skyscrapers what you should do in case of an attack like that, but for a town hall in a small county, a school, or a mom and pop grocery store. I know the shooting we had at Walmart here in El Paso. The young man that did it took the parking place my wife and I vacated because she wanted to go see about a sale at another store. Otherwise, we'd have been in the Walmart when he got there. And let me tell you, I would have not looked kindly on somebody shooting and might have been called upon to react. Now, what would I have done? Well, in all likelihood, I'd have shot him. Well, a Navy vet House GOP candidate, he's seeking the Michigan seat, has a proposal to cut taxes for first responders. A Flint native U.S. Navy veteran named Amir Hassan, Republican candidate for Michigan's 8th Congressional District, proposes giving a sweeping tax break that would eliminate income tax for the first responders, including nurses, teachers, firefighters, and police officers, who make less than $100,000 a year. Well, we finally got a news reporter who is telling the truth. Ex-ABC News reporter, what's his name? Terry Moran admits ABC was biased against Trump due to lack of viewpoint diversity. Says he played devil's advocate inside the ABC newsroom trying to get colleagues to see the other side. They weren't having any of it. He said the newsroom is filled with like-minded liberals and lacks viewpoint diversity. He spent nearly 28 years at ABC News, was dropped by the outlet in June after attacking President Trump and the White House aide Stephen Miller on social media. Now gives his commentary on Substack. Liam Neeson, Pamela Anderson have hooked up. That's after Neeson claimed he was done with love. He's also going to star in the reboot of Naked Gun. See if he's got the ability to emulate as Nielsen. Now, Trump has pushed back against Russia's Medvedev war warnings, suggested he watch his words. Medvedev invoked Russia's dead hand nuclear system after Trump gave his warning. It's going to keep on till somebody's going to shoot the nukes and we're going to have an all-out nuclear war. Well, David Hogg just will not go away. He has thrown a profanity-laced Epstein accusation at Trump. He's accused Trump of a criminal cover-up despite the DOJ memo saying there's no client list. Former Democratic National Committee Vice Chair and progressive firebrand David Hogg says Biden should have released it. Trump should, but he won't because he's on the list. David Hogg needs to shut up and go back to school. Well, playground ready shoes for back to school are costing less than $100 a pair. I remember we can get a pair of tennis shoes for $20. Well, an ancient Roman soldier's monthly paycheck has been dug up in pristine condition in the countryside. It's a collection of 25 silver coins from 160 to 170 AD. Those depictions of emperors. It was found in Norfolk, England. 1900-year-old Roman coin hoard. 25 silver denarii in total, equal to the monthly salary of a Roman legionary or a citizen soldier. Found by metal detectors to turn them over to authorities. Yeah, let's see what else we got here. SpaceX is getting ready to launch 4 astronauts up to the International Space Station on board the Dragon spacecraft today. We'll see how that plays out. Well, a shooter with no prior criminal past went on a shooting rampage outside a casino in Reno. And we have a typical internet's been spotty here. And the question is, why? Well, we're going to go to our main topic. We're still talking about a lot of UFO-related stories. Remember, UFO became a joke. Cletus he was the size of a booger with skinny legs, statement on one of the nighttime talk shows pretty much sealed the deal in regard to UFOs being a joke. But then they changed the name to unidentified aerial phenomena and suddenly it became respectable again. Well, among the many things that the Air Force undertook after they shut down Project Blue Book in December of 1969, part of their justification was the scientific study of unidentified flying objects. You might know it better as the Condon report. 965 pages, and it was full of graphs and equations and case studies, even a glossary defining the words. At the end of the day, the core finding, nothing has come from the study of UFOs that would add to scientific knowledge. In other words, it's useless to continue to look, so let's just go on to something else. Newspapers applauded the verdict. Budget committees felt a sense of relief, and the Pentagon stopped its public UFO project. But almost from the day the Condon report was released, and I've read it, and it's a lot of pontificating that says nothing. It became a lightning rod, sparking allegations of bias and sloppy analysis and even hidden agendas. Well, to understand more about the Condon report, we need to go back to the committee's inception, look at its procedures, and trace the trail of dissent that perpetuated the mystery long after the Air Force said the case was closed. Now, understand, I was commissioned in 75, and there were procedures in place to be followed if, in fact, you came in upon a UFO, as I did. Now, Condon was a respected physicist, former director of the National Bureau of Standards. And he was handpicked in 1966 to chair the University of Colorado UFO project. Air Force funded that study with $539,000, which in today's dollars would be about $5 million. They were hoping an outside panel would finally silence critics who said Blue Book lacked scientific rigor. And Condon's instructions were simple: review 2 decades of Air Force files, investigate fresh reports, and advise whether more research made sense. But from the moment the ink dried on the contract, the internal memo showed the project was already in trouble. Committee investigator David Saunders wrote in his journal that Condon privately called UFO buffs a bunch of nuts before the fieldwork even began. Other staffer Norman Levine later testified that Condon said, "I'm not supposed to find anything." Now, these remarks, of course, never made it into the final report, but they made it clear there wasn't a whole lot of impartiality in the investigation. The Air Force wanted the question of UFOs ended, at least publicly. Now, the methodology of the panel, they divided 59 new UFO incidents into 4 buckets, if you will: astronomical, aircraft or weather, poor data, and unexplained. Roughly 30% of the events they investigated wound up in the unexplained. Cases like the McMinnville photos and the RB-47 radar visual encounter, each of which featured multi-sensor data. Strangely, when Condon wrote his summary, he noted that even the unexplained cases don't establish the presence of phenomena beyond known technology. Of course, critics immediately stepped up about this apparent disconnect, if you will. If the case was labeled unexplained after months of study, how could one reasonably conclude it showed no sign of new phenomena? J. Allen Hynek, once Blue Book's chief scientific advisor, called the logic being demonstrated by Condon curiously circular. Well, skeptics inside the project found themselves removed. Saunders and Levine were fired after they leaked a memorandum, or a so-called Lowe memo, named for project coordinator Robert Lowe, which said that the Colorado study aimed to convince the public unidentified to have been misidentified. That leak was published in Look magazine in 1968, which ignited a media storm. Condon labeled the memo innocent pre-planning, but the damage had been done. A lot of folks saw a predetermined outcome masquerading as neutral inquiry. Still, when the report came out, mainstream reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The New York Times said titled its editorial, "UFOs Put to Rest." Congress, swamped with Vietnam appropriations, was relieved to get rid of another contentious topic. Air Force announced Blue Book's termination within weeks, citing Condon's findings verbatim. Television news declared the flying saucer era is finished. The unresolved stamp would fade from official vocabulary after this. And then the peer reviews rolled in. Dr. James McDonald, an atmospheric physicist at the University of Arizona, twined a report during a packed symposium. He highlighted misidentified radar data, mathematical errors, and gross neglect of pilot testimony. He did a 155-page rebuttal that argued that at least half a dozen cases met rigorous scientific criteria for high strangeness. Simultaneous radar and visual and photographic confirmation with no plausible prosaic explanation. Hynek, for his part, said the report was logically flawed. He asked how science could unexplained data was simply deemed unworthy of further study. And certainly he had a good point. Even the National Academy of Sciences, which has officially endorsed Condon's summary, acknowledged the cracks. Internal Academy review, unearthed at a 1976 FOIA request, revealed several panelists worried that the study's statistical treatment was too thin to warrant sweeping conclusions. However, the public never heard these doubts as the report's headline verdict ultimately prevailed. Mainstream media strikes again. The effect on research funding was immediate and chilling. NASA shelved a proposed satellite-based UFO sensor array. National Science Foundation rejected grant proposals even mentioned the subject. University departments advised tenure candidates to avoid the subject entirely. In Washington, the Air Force embraced the term UFO as a weapon against budgetary constraints. In other words, the Condon report did the job it was supposed to. In silencing one channel, the verdict amplified another one. Civilian groups like NICAP and APRO ramped up private investigations, often collaborating with local police and radar operators the Air Force now ignored. Classified military incidents continued, in spite of the downplaying by Condon. In 1973, NORAD communication declassified only in 2000. Logs unidentified tracks at 90,000 feet over Montana. And the annotation is in this release that no interceptor launch was authorized due to current policy. In other words, Blue Book might be dead, but the unknowns were still buzzing America's defense networks. In the late 1970s, disillusioned insiders began leaking. The FOIA suit filed by researcher Robert Todd ensured the release of 10,000 pages of Blue Book case files the Air Force had withheld. A lot of them contradicted Condon's assurances and nothing remarkable remained. Among these was the Minot B-52 visual radar encounter of 1968, which the Condon's report team never analyzed, but which the Air Force Strategic Air Command deemed high priority. If the Condon report overlooked such data, what other information might have been set aside in the interest of brevity? When former FAA officials testified in 1980 at the citizens' hearing on disclosure about radar tapes confiscated by the CIA, tapes from a 1976 Iranian jet scramble that nearly resulted in missile release against the glowing spear was released, which widened the cracks. Condon never mentioned it. The event occurred during his study window, but outside his evidence net. Critics argued the omission proved either inadequate scope or deliberate boundary setting. Historians now see the Condon report as both an ending and a beginning. It ended public Air Force involvement, freezing UFO research in a stigma deep freeze for almost 20 years. Yet vacuum pushed the mystery into classified corridors. Black budget programs became the wording of the day, and into civilian freedom of information activism. By the time pilots off USS Princeton met a tic-tac in 2004, the official line that UFOs hold no scientific value sounded increasingly brittle. Data bottleneck simply burst elsewhere. Well, interestingly enough, the Air Force public exit from the UFO investigative field paved the way for secret DIA contracts, special access programs, and a money trail that eventually surfaced in AATIP and ultimately into congressional hearings that shook Capitol here today. The lesson of the Condon report's clear. You can declare the unknown solved without solving it, and the mystery will move into darker places, gather most evidence and resentment until the cycle of disclosure begins anew. Well, as I said earlier, in December 1969, Project Blue Book shut its doors. There was a very short press release. No threat to national security, no evidence of advanced technology, nothing further to investigate. Everybody move along. Headlines implied the Air Force had flipped the off switch on the entire UFO question. And that was the definite message Washington wanted the public to hear and understand. What almost no one outside the classified world realized is that another switch flipped on deep inside the national security apparatus. And it happened that very same week. Nameplates changed, reports vanished behind vaulted doors, and real work moved to offices that didn't officially exist. Within days of Blue Book shutting down, certain interesting unknowns migrated to the Air Force Foreign Technology Division. I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same base that had actually hosted Project Blue Book. Officially, Foreign Technology Division analyzed Soviet hardware, big jet parts smuggled out of Eastern Europe, radar sets recovered from crash sites in Vietnam. Unofficially, it had 3 standing orders. 1, collect radar tapes and gun camera film showing maneuverability beyond known aircraft. 2, ship any exotic debris to Foreign Technology Division's Materials Directorate for Mineralogy Studies. And 3, forward national security relevant cases to higher headquarters under a new label, UFO B, for believe hostile. Now, these directives never hit the Federal Register. They appear on the heavily redacted Air Force manuals obtained through decades-old FOIA suits. Takeaway is the UFO did not stop investigating UFOs. It just told you it did. Now, by 1970, we had 2 other code-name projects underway. One was Moon Dust, and the second one was Blue Fly. Now, publicly, they were foreign space object recovery teams, rapid response units that grabbed Soviet satellite wreckage before it fell into enemy hands. In actuality, these same units' task was scooping up anything that crashed and couldn't be matched to a known rocket, plane, or meteor. Field reports from moon dust teams describe debris displaying unusually low magnetic permeability or honeycomb composite unknown to Air Force labs. Each crate of recovered materials went straight into the Foreign Technology Division's hangar nicknamed the Coal Room. And what happened after the doors were shut is still a matter of security classification. Well, Blue Book's demise also coincided with an increase in CIA interest. In a 1975 internal memorandum declassified in 2017, Officer Scientific Intelligence Officer boasted the agency's so-called Weird Desk, taking the point on anomalous aerial systems because they might cloak Soviet spycraft or experimental propulsion. The memo asked for covert collection on 5 specific hotspots around the U.S., missile fields, and major defense contractors. In other words, while the agency publicly echoed the Air Force line, nothing here to see, privately funded sensors to watch America's most sensitive airspace for whatever might be flying around out there. Then we come to the 1980s. A handful of Defense Intelligence Agency analysts and Air Force colonels formed a off-the-book study club, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Work Group, or ATP. Unclassified cover topic was propulsion concepts. The meeting minutes found, as a result of whistleblower lawsuits, show sessions titled Field Propulsion Schemes and Possible ET Parameters. Now, ATP didn't have any official budget. Members pulled travel under generic consultation codes made after hours at Bowling Air Force Base and swapped classified case files they believed were too hot for standard channels. One of these files actually contained a 1986 incident where a NORAD radar site tracked the object crossing the continental U.S. at Mach 17 before it made a 90-degree turn over Colorado with no loss of speed. This event never reached Blue Book, because Blue Book was no more. Instead, it went straight to the ATP's classified annex, then up the chain to the newly formed Strategic Defense Initiative Organization. They thought that blip might represent a Soviet breakthrough technology. Well, all of this behind-the-scenes maneuvering set the stage for the first program that finally leaked into daylight. The Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program. 2008, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid funneled $22 million through the DIA to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Studies. Contract language is broad. Advanced aerospace threats. Deliberately avoided any mention of UFOs. Instead, it called for novel propulsion studies and the creation of a secure facility for material retrieval. Publicly, while this organization focused on next-generation craft, it also privately opened 38 sub-projects ranging from metamaterial analysis to human physiological effects near anomalous vehicles. Now, the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies built a vault in Las Vegas that is said to house fragments and isotopic ratios not found in industrial supply chains, according to a leaked DIA audit. Scientists signed non-disclosure agreements and worked under top-secret restricted data covers. That's the same level of classification we use for nuclear secrets. Now, when the 2-year contract ended, the work spun off into a smaller effort inside the office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. This was nicknamed AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Operated between 2010 and about 2012, when the funding ended. But it stayed around until at least 2017. Unlike the previous organization, this one lived on a shoestring budget, maybe $10 million in total. But it leveraged special access channels. Analysts got their hands on classified Navy videos, such as FLIR and Gimbal and Go Fast, to compile a slide deck for senior leadership that read just like science fiction. Right angle turns at hypersonic velocity and instantaneous stops, no observable propulsion. When former program director Luis Elizondo resigned in frustration, he took unclassified portions of that data straight to the media. That's the spark that ignited the current unidentified aerial phenomena firestorm. Pentagon first denied the AATIP even existed. Then, when it couldn't do that anymore, it pivoted and admitted it had ongoing efforts to study UAPs. By 2020, Congress was asking why the supposedly abandoned, underfunded office had generated evidence the Defense Department couldn't explain. Well, there was a very simple answer for that question. The office wasn't truly abandoned, merely migrated into deeper compartments. Today, the official front program is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Staffers insist this is the most transparent UAP effort ever attempted. But those that have been around the block a few times note familiar fingerprints. The office reports to the same intelligence directorates and once buried moon dust crates, draws on the same special access pools that shielded AATIP slide decks. Now, whether the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office becomes a clearinghouse for real answers and merely the next public facade depends on oversight. So far, it's minimal and mostly classified. Now, none of these programs, the Foreign Technology Directorate follow-on, such as moon dust and the CIA Weird Desk and the ATP and the AAWSAP and the AATIP, were listed in the federal budget appendices you can download each February. Their funding hid in program element codes buried amid counter-drone R&D or missile defense line items. When Pentagon controllers shuffled a few million inside a $700 billion budget, That move barely ripples the surface. That's why every time an official says there's no ongoing UFO program, you need to think about that. Maybe the named program shut down, but its successor, under a new acronym, probably opened that same afternoon. We started this show talking about Blue Book's closure. What followed wasn't really a vacuum, but a relay race. Each time public pressure receded, new classified cells sprang up to handle the cases still coming in. And they are still coming in, folks. Now you got the public study ending, that's Blue Book. Data flow continues to come in, it's got to go somewhere. Classified cell absorbs and the hidden budget is hidden in black lines. You break that loop and a secrecy wall might actually crumble. But until that point in time, fresh programs will keep replacing the old ones. Each one more hidden and classified than the last one because the incidents never stop. Only the labels stop. Now, when Blue Book closed its doors in 1969, the Air Force declared the UFO problem solved. Officially, there was no threat. No flying saucer demanding more tax dollars. In truth, though, the investigation continued. It only shifted its focus underground. The black budget, a complex network of classified line items, serves as a conduit, facilitating the transfer of money through shell companies, innocuous project codes, compartmented special access programs. You have to understand that the same hidden financial channels that funded stealth bombers and spy satellites now finance the government's secretive, unidentified aerial phenomenon projects. Now, every October, the president submits a thick budget book to Congress. And every page lists the programs with very title names such as aircraft procurement, Air Force or research, development, test, or evaluation. What the public doesn't see is a parallel set of colored annexes nicknamed the Rainbow Books. These carry code letters, N for military intelligence, N for National Reconnaissance Office, D for defense wide, that summarize billions of dollars in a single bland phrase such as special activities. Legislators that look at this have to have the right clearances to get a closed-door briefing. The rest of the senators and congressmen who vote on these bills do it literally in the dark. In those annexes, the real program titles vanish. A line that reads Advanced Materials Research, $22 million, could actually pay for turbine blades, direct energy weapons, or warehouse preserving alleged crash debris. Congress sees the price tag, but not the accompanying notes. Even audit agencies are walled off. Government Accountability Office has to request special access merely to verify the funds weren't lost to fraud. So you have to ask yourself, how does cash leak from an unmarked ledger to a private lab building that has exotic hardware? And the favorite trick, of course, is the so-called pass-through contract. And the way that works is rather simple. You've got a well-known defense giant such as Lockheed, gets an award tagged Aviation Systems Risk Reduction, and the description of the program looks routine. Dollar figure might be small enough to avoid headlines. Lockheed then subcontracts 70-90% of that money to a lesser-known subsidiary, such as its Skunk Works, or to a niche vendor with no public profile. And this subcontract is where the exotic work really takes place. Inside the subcontract, specific tasks are wrapped in a SAP code word, such as Raven or Cobra or Kite. Anyone outside the code words access list only sees a blank page. Even Lockheed's own finance department sees a lump sum cost labeled priority R&D and nothing else. And because the prime contract appears normal, routine defense contract audit agency checks rarely drill into the guts of the subcontract. The true purpose, evaluating the materials recovered from a crash site, for instance, remains invisible to all but a few cleared engineers. Think of it like laboring your grocery purchase office supplies on a company expense report, except the receipt is encrypted and the accounting software itself is classified. Most black budget dollars flow through special access programs, each one requiring a second or a third layer of clearance above top secret. Roughly 2,000 special access programs exist at any time, and they're grouped into three areas. You've got acquisition SAPs, which covers new weapons such as the B-2 bomber. Intelligence SAPs, that's the clandestine collection, spy satellites. Operations support SAPs, these are covert logistics for field units. Now, normal special access programs are already hard to track, but the most sensitive are called waived SAPs. And these, even Congress Defense Committee receive only a budget total. Nobody sees the program name, the contractor list, or the technical objective. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid tried and failed to get the ATIP, an early Pentagon UAP effort, upgraded to waive status, arguing the discoveries are vastly beyond anything the Air Force has ever considered. Although the waiver was denied, the attempt shows how easily truly exotic findings could vanish behind a single administrative checkbox. 2008, the Defense Intelligence Agency awarded $22 million to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies through a contract called Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Application Program. Publicly, that money was for threat forecasting, such as hypersonic glide vehicles. Privately, it covered field teams collecting materials from alleged UAP encounters, storing them in a custom-built Nevada warehouse ready for specialized containment. Now, why didn't auditors say anything about this? Because these dollars are buried inside a larger pot called Early Procurement Air Force Classified. The footnote to this pot read, program sustains cutting-edge aerospace capabilities. So unless an investigator knew to connect the language to Bigelow's warehouse, the funds looked as ordinary as spare F-16 parts. And another level of opacity less on the intellectual property firewall. When private firms discover something valuable, such as metal with a micro-layered isotope, they can designate that data as proprietary. Under federal acquisition regulations, the government must protect that IP from disclosure, even to Congress in some circumstances. So a contractor can hold exotic material, conduct analysis, and refuse to share full test results with oversight committees claiming trade secrets. Now, the government owns the end product, but the contractor controls the paperwork, and by extension, controls the public narrative. Now, you combine pass-through contracts, SAP walls, waive congressional visibility, and IP shields, and you get a perfectly functional vanishing act. Discovers while anomalous alloys or sensor data pointing to impossible aerodynamics because it enters a maze with 4 exit routes. Number 1, reclassification. If findings hint at breakthrough technology, the Pentagon relabels them under a higher classification, which locks out prior researchers. You can have a compartment shift, where compartments split. Different aspects, such as meteorology, propulsion, or biology, are shoved into separate SAPs, so no single team sees the whole puzzle. And you got corporate absorption. The prime vendor buys the smaller lab, bearing all the research inside corporate R&D protected by IP law. And then you got controlled destruction. In rare cases, hardware deemed too sensitive is literally melted down or disassembled into untraceable parts. Documented only in a burn bag stored in a safe place no inspector can open without a code word. So you have to ask yourself why all this matters now. So black budget secrecy had a purpose. They kept stealth bombers hidden from Soviet analysts and encrypted satellites safe from prying eyes. But that very same machinery can muffle data the public needs, especially if the anomalies aren't foreign tech but unknown physics. Radar operators, Navy pilots, nuclear-based security teams all report craft defying conventional explanations. But all the sensor files are behind SAP doors. Civilian air safety bodies like the FAA remain blind. And even worse, the scientific community can't test exotic materials. The sample lives under proprietary non-disclosure and classified vaults. Recent congressional hearings tried to pierce this veil, demanding full SAP inventory of UAP-related programs. The Defense Department resisted, citing national security. Lawmakers came back and said, how can we protect the nation if potential breakthrough discoveries such as propulsion materials, even biological findings, are locked away from peer review? Well, that's a tug of war that's still going on today. One fact is clear. Without budget sunlight, the most intriguing data stays locked in dark rooms studied by a handful of engineers who can't publish and can't be questioned. Now, future shows going to try to use open source breadcrumbs, contract award notices, SEC filings, patent trials, to shine light into these dark rooms. We'll trace out a $1.2 million Air Force sensor upgrade paid for a covert metamaterials lab. A flight safety data initiative funneled infrared footage straight to a contractor with long-standing ties to covert aerospace programs. None of these covert trails prove extraterrestrial origin, of course, but they do prove the government still spends significant sums chasing something it refuses to describe to the public. These are your tax dollars at work. And you're going to see how much can be inferred from budget codes alone and how much remains hidden by design. The task is to separate legitimate secrecy from institutional habit, to ask where national defense ends and intellectual curiosity begins. Because if breakthrough discoveries sit behind these SAP doors, they belong to every taxpayer whose taxpayer dollars want to fund them, and every pilot who needs to know what's really in the sky. We're going to talk about where public skepticism meets the quiet march of classified research, and take part in a debate over truth versus secrecy, as we're entering the most volatile era yet. And on that note, we come to the end of today's show. Run out of time. We'll be back tomorrow. Once again, you'll be listening to Ken Hudnall and the Ken Hudnall Show. Until then, have a truly great evening.